after Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharet, Malachi Elyon, Melech, Malachi Amlach, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Moachel Shalom, Malachi Ashalom, Malachi Shabbat Shalom. We welcome the angels. We now light candles to begin Shabbat as a community. We ask you to please rise. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Please say Shabbat Shalom to someone nearby. We turn to page 15, a series of Psalms extending us from the week into Shabbat. Lechu niranina, lechu niranina, lechu niranina, lechu niranina, lechu niranina, lechu Shanakot bedor v'omaram to elivavhem v'im lo yadu dirachai asher nitbati v'yapim yon el menuchati. Page 16. Yeramayam, Yeramayam, below, Yeramayam, 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 below, Yismichu Hashamayim, Yismichu Hashamayim, Yismichu Hashamayim, b'tagil haaretz. Ya'al osadai v'kol asher bo az yiranenu kol atzei ya'ar lifnei Adonai kiva kiva lishpot haaretz yishpot tevel b'tzedek v'amim be'emunato. Page 17. Zaru al tzadik ol yishrei lev simcha simechu tzadikim Adonai vehodu lezecher kodsho. Bottom of page 19, we continue Roman move, but the rabbi will cover. Turn to page 20 and we rise for Psalm 29. You may be seated. Page 23, Psalm for Shabbat. מזמור שיר ליום השבת. שמח שמך. עוד ינובו מסבת השם ימרננים יו להגיד כי אשר אדוני צורי ולא עוולת בוי. Page 24. אדוני מלך מעילה ושלטי שחר כסעשה רבתי כאן תבל פעלתי מלך. עדותיך נאמנו מלבדך נאווה קודש אדוני לאורך ימים. Foreigners Kaddish, page 24. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. ביעלמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל. בעגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם לעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו amen. We turn to page 28. We rise for Ma'ariv beginning with Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. May be seated. We continue with the bracha, recognizing God as the creator of the universe. Baruch atah Adonai. Umavir yom umevi laila umavdir ben yom uvein laila Adonai tzivaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimlok aleinu le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Hamariv Aravim. Page 29. Avat olam ben Yisroel amchavta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu Akin Adonai Eloheinu v'shofenu תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם ושבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We continue silently, pages 30 and 31. Adonai Elohechem Emer. Page 32. U'malchuto v'ratzon kiblu alehem Moshe u'bnei Yisrael lechanu shiram simcha rabba v'yameru chulam yichamocha v'elim Adonai mikamocha nedar b'kodesh norati lo rosef eleh malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe ze'eli anu v'yameru Adonai imloch li'olam va'ed v'nemar kifadar et Yaakov galom yad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai ga Yisrael. Page 33, Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom ve'amidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom ve'amidenu malkeinu l'chaim. First one is question. Ufros aleinu sukat shilomecha baruch ata Adonai hapore sukat shalom aleinu v'yakol amo Yisrael v'ya Yerushalayim. Please rise. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asor et ha-Shabbat lidor tamperit olam eni u'b'nei Yitgada Shemei Rabbah Yomad Yivrak Yerutev Yamlich Malchuteh B'chayekon Uv Yomechon Uv Chayedecho B'ed Yisrael Bagala Bagala Uv Izman Kariv Yimeroh Yehi Shmei Rabba Mivarach Li'alam Olam Yamaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach viparit Roma vidnase, vid hadarit ale, vid halal, shemedi kudeshabrichu, leila min kobir kata, veshirata, tushbekata, venechemata, damiran bioma, vimeru. Amen. The core of prayer, the Amidah, beginning silently on page 35. Ose shalom libromam, oyase shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Yase shalom, yase shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, yase shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, yase shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, yase shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Shabbat shalom. So I used to think that being unique was really important. When I was younger, I hated conformity. If everyone would stand up in a line for lunch, I'd sit down and I'd wait. If blue was the color of the day, I'd wear green. Even during my teenage years, when buying clothes or music, I always looked for something that felt a bit unique. How else do you explain my love of cantorial music? As a youngster, I hated the idea that I needed to conform to a standard. I needed to be something else, something unique. Except in reality, we're not as unique as we might imagine. Biologically, science tells us that we all have individualized fingerprints and tooth marks, and both our retinas and our DNA patterns are particular and distinct. That should qualify us as unique. But if we're really so different from one another, how is it that doctors can heal each of us with the same techniques? How can there be a commonality within medical science that provides general care instructions for broken arms and even headaches? Certainly, we have a lot more in common than we'd like to admit. And it's imperative that we not confuse the fact that two physiologies, it's easy for me to say, are identical, with the assumption that we are totally different. In reality, we are not as unique as we'd like to imagine. Marketers try to stress the fact that we are unique with their one-of-a-kind items, their limited edition releases. They want you to believe that you can express yourself through customization and having everything tailored just to your exclusive needs and your wants. But how many top fades has your barber cut this last week? How many oat milk vanilla lattes has your barista poured just today? For years, my favorite Yankee was Derek Jeter. And to my dismay, I've recently discovered I might not have been alone. Often we think that the things that we want and that are solely ours turn out to be shared items, shared preferences, or even shared values. We'd be surprised at the degree to which society and our upbringing have influenced our choices, our favorites, and our preferences. I'm willing to bet that there is not a single person here tonight who's planning to have a delicious locust for dinner. It's kosher. And if you're not kosher, I'm also willing to bet that not one of you is going to eat dog for an upcoming meal. Simply Rover and Buddy are not on the menu. But the fact is, in many countries, they are. The fact that for us such is obvious should indicate that we've learned a sense of shared values evidenced within our commonality. I remember Rabbi Eddie Feinstein returning from leading the Dallas Solomon Schechter students on a trip to New York and describing the students' utter shock. He had taken them to Borough Park to meet their Hasidic peers. And when the Dallas students asked the Brooklyn students what they did for fun, they were aghast. The Dallasites were aghast to learn that learning was the hobby and the fun of the Hasidic students. Evidently, even what we enjoy is a learned behavior. At the very best, we're selecting between limited options which society has dictated as acceptable for us. We must not confuse preferences with uniqueness. Often, we populate our lives with the things that we think define our individuality, but in truth, we're happy to know that these preferences actually make a sense of commonality for us. They enable us to identify with a group or even a subgroup. On the deepest level, trying to be unique is actually in its own way an attempt to fit in. Expressing ourselves is a call and a search for others who are doing the same thing. If you think back to the 1960s, the hippies insisted on dressing differently, on wearing their hair differently, on not fitting in, and then proceeded to embrace hairstyles and clothing that were very similar one to the other. They rebelled through conformity and by identifying with their peers. One of my favorite movie lines comes from the life of Brian, in where there's one individual standing up on a rock before a crowd, and he demands that everyone declare, "I am unique," to which, with one exception, the entire group declares in unison, "I am unique," except for the one Schlemiel, who's truly unique, follows up with, "I'm not." Often that sense of being distinct can be uncomfortable. It can be associated with feeling disconnected. As we turn to this week's Torah portion of Bamidbar, we open the fourth book of the Torah, in which this dynamic plays out chapter after chapter. The book of Numbers begins in the shadow of Mount Sinai and portrays the Israelites' journey across the wilderness to the edge of the promised land. The book is replete with a recurring cycle of disconnection and then reconnection. The text we hear, the Israelites complaining about the food and demanding a return to the good old days in Egypt. Miriam and Aaron complain about Moses. Korach rebels against Moses' authority. And the scouts want to abandon the project of settling the promised land over and over and over. There are pockets of the Israelite camp that try to assert their uniqueness, only to find that God and the Israelite people simply won't tolerate that distinction. The cycles of Numbers teach us that every time we try to assert ourselves as loners, our covenant with God simply won't allow it. Judaism extends beyond that search for uniqueness, and it extends to the pursuit of blending our individuality into community. Because being unique is not the point. The point is being loved. What makes us special, truly special, are the connections and the commitments that we make to one another and to ourselves. The more we connect, the more we're loved, and the more we love. In the wilderness of life, it is not our uniqueness that gives us meaning, but rather the identification with and the embracing of the people who simply won't let us go. May it be God's will that in our search for self, we come to understand that our best selves emerge in connection with loved ones, with community, and as contributing members of society. Shabbat Shalom. We turn back in our Sidurim to page 47. We rise for Vayechulu. Vayechulu hashamayim ve'haaretz v'chol tzevam vayichal Elohim vayom hashvi melachto asher asa vayibod vayom hashvi mikol melachto asher asa vayivarich Elohim et yom hashvi vayikadesh oto ki bo shabbat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim lasot. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora El Elyon Konei Shamayim va'aretz Magin Avot bidvaro Mechayim etim b'mamaro Ha'el HaGadol en kamoh Hameniach le'amo B'yom Shabbat kodsho רצה להניח להם, כי בם רצה להניח להם, לפניו נעבור ברב הפחד, ונודה לשמו בכל יום תמיד בין הברכות אל ההודעות. אדון השלום מקדש השבת ומברך שבי ומניח בקדושה לעמד ושני עונג זכר למעשה בראשית. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו רצה במנוחתנו קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך סבנו מטובך ושמחנו בישועתך ותאר ליבנו מעבדך באמת והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה וברצון שבת קודשך ואנוכו בישראל מקדש שמך ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. יתקרא ויקרא שמי רבה מיום דברך ירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובימייכון וחי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם עולם ימיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה ברכו לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תברתה ונחמתה דמירן ביעלמה ויאמרו אמן. תתקבל צלון הון ובעל הון דכל ישראל קודם אבו הון דבשמיה ויאמרו אמן. יש שלום הרב מן שמיים וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו. Kiddush on page 49. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodesho b'yama u'v'ratzon inchilanu zikaron למעשה בראשית כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש זכר ליציאת מצרים כי בנו בחרת אותנו קידשת מכל העמים ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. 51 Alleluia. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמטבחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים לפניהם אחי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוצר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת זו בגבי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו, אמת מלכנו וזולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת יום ושבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ימעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני לך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד, ושמו אחד. May be seated. On this Shabbat, our hearts go out to the families of Bernard Lauterbach and Joshua Akiba Kaiden. We are observing the yahrzeits of Jack Alter, Shirley Alter, Molly Burnett, Ida Eisenbaum, Jacob Frank, Isidore Fried, Ruth Goroff, Abe Greenberg, Henry Greenspan, Irving Greenstein, Betty Jean Kaplan, Jenny Grossman Karn, Reba Lapin, Meredith Long, Sam Mag, Leah Peterman, Doris Rosenblatt, Morris Reshevsky, Goldie Reshevsky, Evelyn Tremarky, Mark Warshaw, Harold Weisfeld, and Henry Wind. All those in a period of mourning, those observing a yahrzeit, we invite you to please rise. Words of Mourner's Kaddish on page 52. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach v'yalam l'amei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei kudusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran v'yalma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. You may be seated. It's good to be back. It's nice to go on vacation, but it's also wonderful to return. We have a big weekend. We hope that sometime in the course of the day tomorrow, we'll have hundreds and hundreds of people coming through our doors to celebrate with us. So tomorrow morning, we will have our first of our Shabbat morning Ruachs beginning here in the sanctuary at 10 o'clock. The traditional service will be in the chapel beginning at 9:30 as usual. So please note the time difference is 10 o'clock in here, 9:30 in the chapel. Tomorrow evening, we bring together 6 congregations to engage in Torah study. The Tikkun Leil Shavuot will be here in Brit Shalom beginning at 7 p.m. and going through 11. We'll have food for you. We'll daven, Havdalah. We'll begin Mariv and Yontif together as a community. We will also have for our young professionals a pullout that will start at 7:30 for them. During the hours of 7:30, you can let people know 7:30 and 9, there will be babysitting available so that the young professionals can participate. Sunday morning, Monday morning, Shavuot. Services are at 9:30. Monday, we will recite Yizkor as part of services as well. I think that covers everything. Pretty busy weekend here in the synagogue. I know Melissa's exhausted, just the preparation for such. But we look forward to seeing everybody, to celebrating the Shabbat, to studying together, and to celebrating Yontif together as a community. We're going to conclude page 395 with the words of Hatikva. Please rise. Olo daleva pnima nefesh Yehudi homia ufatei mizra kadima ayin letzion Sophia. Liotam chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Please find someone to bless. So again, you may have noticed the rabbi is incredibly quiet. The voice of our congregation has been silenced for several weeks, but the laryngitis is improving. And we're looking forward to hearing his voice hopefully tomorrow and the next couple days even more and more and more. I, for one, really look forward to it. Shabbat Shalom.